Hi everyone, welcome to my talk. My name's Louise and I work at Madrid Young Learners. So this talk today is on developing reading and listening skills. So it's for all those teachers who teach teenagers, exam classes and adults, and we're going to be looking at how to get more out of your reading and listening activities in class and how to really help students develop their skills rather than just completing the tasks that we set them in the course book. So before we start, you'll see on your handout you've got a bingo grid. So I'd like you to complete that with 9 words that you think you're going to hear during the session. So they can't be words that are in the title or grammar words like and or is, okay? But any keywords that you think you're going to hear in the next 45 minutes, please write them on the bingo grid. And as you listen, you're going to tick off the words that you hear. Okay, so just a few seconds to complete that. Okay, so when you finish, can I ask you all to look at the screen? Okay, so we're going to start by me showing you a picture. And I want you to read what it says and tell the person next to you what you think you saw. So you're only going to see the picture for 1 second. So you're going to look at it really quickly and remember what you think you saw. Okay, ready? Okay, I'll show you it again if you missed it, but it's only going to be very quick, okay? Okay, so tell your partner what you think you saw on the screen. Okay, any volunteers who wants to volunteer what they think they read? Yes? Okay, how many words was that? 4, sure? Okay, so we're going to look at it more closely and see if you were right. Okay, so you missed out 1 word, okay? Most people missed out 1 word. Does anybody know why you did that? Okay, so you've got 2 thers in that triangle. Exactly. So that's what I wanted to demonstrate, that because we're all proficient readers and speakers of English, our brain reads in chunks. So when you're presented with something like that, your brain will fill in the gaps and will tell you what you think you saw. Okay, but I've done this activity with pre-intermediate and lower level students, and they always get the answer right. They always say, there's 5 words, Paris in the spring. Does anybody know why they might get it wrong? Why they might get it right and that we get it wrong?
It's already used to.
Yeah, exactly, okay? So they don't have the ability that we have to read in chunks. So they're reading each word individually. They're reading intensively. Okay, so this is something that we're going to look at today. How can we encourage them to read more like we do as natural readers of English? Okay, so first of all, we're going to look at some of the problems that students have when they read and listen in English. Because if we can understand where they have difficulty, then we can try and help them. Okay, so for this activity, I'm going to need 2 volunteers to come to the stage. Would anyone like to? You don't need to say anything, okay? You just need to come to the stage. Anyone? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so if I ask one of you to stand here facing me, and one of you to stand here facing the screen. Okay, so if you come and stand this side, face each other. Okay, so you're going to read the text on the screen and look for a key word, okay? And when you see the keywords, you're going to put your hands up, okay? And you're going to look at his eyes and see and notice what his eyes are doing, in which direction they're moving, all right? So the keyword that you're going to look for, you can all do it as well. You're going to look for the keyword window. And when you see window, raise your hands. And you're going to look at his eyes and see in which direction they're moving, okay? Okay, found it? Great. Which number was it in? 5. Okay, great. So what were his eyes doing? Did you notice which direction they were moving in?
From left to right and then backwards.
Okay, so they were going all over the place, okay? So that technique, if you don't already know, is called scanning. Okay, so it's what we do as natural readers. If we're looking for specific information, we scan, and our eyes don't go from left to right, up and down. They go all over the place, okay? So I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. This time, you're going to choose one of the problems and read it aloud. And you're going to listen and put your thumbs up if you agree that it's a common problem for your students. Or if you don't think it's a common problem, put your thumbs down.
As he's reading.
As he's reading, exactly. So you just need to listen and show us with your thumbs your response. Okay?
Or problem?
Okay, no, this. I think it's a very, very big problem. Maybe a problem, not a problem. Okay?
How many do I have to read?
Just choose one and read one, yeah.
I understand the words, but I still miss the overall meaning.
Okay, do you want to do one more?
I often stop paying attention halfway through a text to have a look out the window or draw in my book.
Okay, thanks very much. You can both sit down. Thank you. Okay, and I'd like you to continue that with the person next to you. So one person's going to read, and the person next to you, just demonstrate with your thumbs if you think it's a really big problem for your students, if you think it's sometimes a problem, or if you think it's not a problem for your students. Okay, so just 1 minute to do that activity together. Okay, thanks very much. All right, so just to have a little bit of feedback, are there any problems which were really common, where you were putting your thumbs up all the time? Anything that stood out for you? For me, for example, with my students, usually number 5 is quite common, especially in exam classes, that they tend to get bored or they start to daydream, especially when they find the answer as well. Okay, so that's connected to number 4 as well. Once you found the answer, you stop listening, you stop reading.
Number 2.
Number 2 as well, okay? Exactly, so students go into panic mode and they forget that they actually do know a lot about the language when they're listening or reading. Anything else that was common? Number 6, okay? Yeah, again, so thinking back to the triangle, students try to read and understand every word, and they don't realise that That's not necessary. We don't do it when in our native language, and it's not necessary to do that when you're reading in a foreign language either. Okay, so we're going to look now at why students might have these problems so that we can understand how we can help them as a teacher. Okay, so what is at the root of these problems? So you've actually got this on the second page of your handout as well, so you don't have to look up at the screen. So we're going to look again at those problems, what students say is the problem, and then we're going to look at the real underlying problems. So we're going to match the problem with the actual underlying reason. Okay, so if we look at number 1, for example, I often don't recognize the vocabulary or structures I know when I hear them in a listening text. So the underlying problem is C. Learners are often not familiar with phonological features of the language, such as connected speech. So they might understand the words if they were written down, but when they hear it, they don't understand them because they don't recognize them when they're connected together. All right, so I want you to just take a few minutes with your partner to look at the problems that students say they have and the underlying reason. And on your handout, just write down the letters and the numbers that you think go together. Okay, so just a couple of minutes to do that. All right, so I think everyone's more or less finished. I'm going to flash up the answers, so just check if yours are the same. If they're not, it's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly correct. Okay, does anyone usually do feedback like this after a listening or a reading exercise? Sometimes? Okay, so it is very tempting to say, right, number 1, hands up, number 2, hands up, but it's very time consuming and it's not really the aim of the exercise. So it is okay to just say, these are the answers, tick, 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 and move on, okay? Because obviously that is what the students just want to know what the answer is. You don't need to waste time going around asking for volunteers, okay? So sometimes it is nicer to do it like that. It's a lot more time efficient. Okay, so we're going to look now at the abilities of a successful reader and listener, as we are, okay? And how can we help our students to become more like us when they read in English? Okay, so what qualities do we have that students don't have? So think back to the triangle that we saw at the beginning of the session. So that could be connected to some of the qualities that we have as good readers and good listeners. So I'm going to show you 4 main qualities that we need to try and encourage in our students. So I'm going to show you only the key words, okay? And I want you to try and decipher what the actual characteristic is. Okay, so you can talk to the person next to you for this. So that's the first one. So the symbols don't mean anything, okay? That's just showing you that there's words missing that you don't know, but you only know the key words, background knowledge and world. So what is the characteristic that we have as successful readers or listeners? So just talk to your partner. Okay, the next one. Okay, so can you try and work out what the surrounding words might be? Okay, next one. And the last one. Okay, so how easy or how difficult was that when some of the words were blotted out by funny symbols? Not too bad. I mean, you can understand, I think, the gist from the words that I've given you, and I'm sure that the answers you came up with won't be massively different from what I'm going to show you now. So did anyone guess the exact words in all those characteristics? No. Did it matter? No, not really, okay? So that's something we really need to communicate to our students, that it doesn't matter if you don't understand every word. If you can understand 1 or 2 words, you probably will understand most of what you're reading or listening to. All right, so just to recap then on the qualities of a successful reader and listener, what do successful readers and listeners draw on? Background knowledge. What are they motivated to do? Read or listen. What do they interact with? And what strategies might they employ? Different ones. Okay, so that one is not in the text. So what did you notice about the questions that I asked you, the comprehension questions? How effective were they at seeing whether you understood the text? You answered the first 3 without any problems. But does that mean that you really understood it? Oops, sorry, I don't know. As a teacher, I don't know that. The final question, you actually had to really think, okay, because the answer is not in the text. So this is something that we're going to be looking at in a moment, how to change our comprehension questions so that learners are really, really thinking. Okay, so talking about employing the correct strategy, how would you read these 2 texts? So I'm going to show you 2 different texts. And I want you to discuss with your partner how you would read them. Would you read them in the same way, or would you read them differently? So you've got a train timetable and a novel. All right, so the train timetable, how would you read that? Or how do you normally read train timetables? Any volunteers? Okay, so exactly. So you don't need to read all of it. So thinking back to the activity we had with the 2 volunteers, how would your eyes be moving over the timetable? Yeah, going up and down, left and right. And once you find it, you stop looking. Exactly. Okay? The novel? Yeah, okay, that's very important as well, okay? So we don't assume that all novels are really interesting. We're going to read every word and every page. But you might maybe skip some bits. Oh, this is a boring paragraph, I'll skip past that. You might go back and read again. Maybe you'll skim read some of it. Maybe a long description that you're not interested in, you might read it fast. Maybe something that's a bit more complex, you might read intensively. So reading every word and really taking in the information. Okay, so this is a skill that students don't really have when they have the skill because they do it in their own language, but they don't use that strategy when they're reading in a foreign language. They'll tend to just read in the same way. Okay, they'll just tend to read everything intensively, word by word by words. Right, so it's really just drawing their attention to things they do in their own language and applying that to when they're reading in a foreign language. Are there any other text types that you think would apply, would have the same kind of characteristics? So a train timetable, obviously not a lot of activities we use in class involve train timetables, but are there any activities we do that involve students skimming the text? Can you think of any? Mm-hmm. Okay, exactly. So gap fills, or when they're needing to look for specific words, that's what they need to do. They need to skim the text. They need to scan the text for the information. But sometimes they need to be told that, otherwise they won't do it. They'll see a long text and they just start reading it. What about a novel? What other kind of texts have require similar strategies? So you might have a newspaper article. So very similar, you read the beginning, maybe read the end, maybe skim through the middle, maybe, oh, an interesting part, I'm going to read that really intensively. So again, students don't tend to do that. And newspaper articles are quite an important part of English language learning. You see them a lot in course books, in exam tasks, and it's really important to draw their attention to that and just point out, okay, it's similar to a novel. What did we do in the last lesson when we looked at the extract from the novel? We're going to do the same thing with the newspaper extracts. Okay? The thing that these both have in common is that students will probably be motivated. If you were doing this in your own language, you'd be motivated to read it. You'd be motivated to read the train timetable because you need to find out when that train's leaving, and you'll be motivated to read the novel, otherwise you'll stop reading it. So that's something else that's really important to encourage, is to encourage that genuine motivation in learners. Okay, and we're going to look in a second about how we can do that. Okay, so thinking back to those comprehension questions that I gave you a minute ago, which were not very good because it didn't require you to really think, it didn't require you to really read much. The answer was right in front of you in the text. And I'll give you tick, 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 all correct, and you think that you're a brilliant reader, but maybe you're not. Okay, so we're going to look at how to approach comprehension questions in a different way. So I'm going to show you a typical example of how coursebooks deal with reading skills. And I'm going to get you to do the activity as if you are learning this foreign language. Okay, so this is the text you're going to read. It's in a language that you don't know. How easy is it to understand? All right, so it's sometimes a bit uncomfortable to put yourself in the position of a language learner if you haven't been in that position for a while, and to actually be presented with a text where you don't really understand anything. But this is what our students go through every day, especially if you teach lower levels. That's probably what English will look like to them, that they recognize, oh, that's maybe a verb, but I have no idea what that means, and therefore I can't understand the text. So now I'm going to show you the comprehension questions. How many can you answer and get right? So let's see. So just take a minute to read them, and then we'll look at it together. All right, so the first question, what was the Flester doing and where? Is it possible to answer that question using the text? Yeah, you can answer it, because the answer's right in front of you. And what sort of a Flester was he? Can we answer that question? Yeah, he was a Palgish Flester. Do we have any idea what that means? No, but we got the answer right. Yay, so 100%. Why did the writer decide not to draw to him? He seemed very changeable, yeah. What does changeable mean? Don't know. Is it good? Is it bad? We don't know. But we got the answer right. How did she deeple? Quistly, yes. We don't know what that means, but we know that she deepled to him quistly. So we got the answer right. And what did she hope would happen later? She'd be able to wrangle to him. Okay, so we don't know what any of that means, but we got all the questions right. So the student gets their test paper back or their exercise back. They got 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5. So they think, this is strange. Why have I got it all right, but I actually didn't understand any of the text? And when I come to read a book for pleasure, or I come to read the news online in English, I don't understand anything. So it's not adding up, and they don't quite understand why they're getting the answers right, but they're still struggling for years and years and years and years. And that could even happen, at intermediate and level and above, that a lot of questions are like that, and it gives them that full sense of hope about their level of English. So we're going to look at how we can maybe just change things slightly, without too much preparation, just to make them really think about their answers and interact with the text. Okay? So we're going to try reading the questions before the text, and guessing what the answers will be. So this is before we've read the text. We don't know what it's about, but we're going to look at the questions first. So just think about the questions as I read them, using your own knowledge of the world, and see if you can answer them. So where was Jane walking? We don't know what the story is. We don't know Jane. Where was she walking? Maybe down the road, maybe to school. What did she hear behind her? So just think about what are the possibilities for the answer to that question. What was her necklace made of? What could it be made of? So you're thinking about materials, types of metals. What did the thief steal? 2 things. Okay, so you have limited answers there that you could actually use. And what did he do next? Okay, so just raise your hands if you think you have quite a good idea about what this story is about, just from reading the questions and trying to answer them. Yeah, so I already have a picture in my mind of what the story is and what's going to happen and what kind of language is going to come up before I've even read the story and before I've seen the words. but because I'm using my own knowledge. Okay, so were your guesses random? No, because you use the questions to help you, and you base them on your previous knowledge of English. So we're going to read the text now and see if any of your answers were right. Okay, so just want you to think, how did your motivation change compared to the first nonsense text that we read? How motivated were you to read that text? Probably a lot more, yeah, because you had some sort of input into that text. You wanted to know if your answers were right, and it probably was quite motivating if you did get the answers right. So it was very simple. It's just simply putting the questions first, and you don't have to rewrite anything. You don't have to do a lot of preparation. You just go straight to the questions. And then instantly students will be more motivated. If you were as the teacher, they will be as the students too. So how did your motivation change? That you were a lot more motivated because you used your background knowledge, which, if you remember the problems that we talked about initially, students don't tend to use their background knowledge of the world to help them understand the text. Okay, so how can we help our learners to become better readers and listeners? So we've looked at 4 areas today. So we've looked at background knowledge, using activities that involve students making use of their own knowledge, because they do come to class already knowing a lot of things, maybe not in English, but their knowledge of the world is quite great already, and we need to really put that to use to help them when they're learning and trying to read and listen in English. Motivation. So motivation doesn't necessarily mean that I like this activity, because not all students are going to like reading or like listening, but motivation is also giving them a real reason to listen or read. If they have a reason, then they'll do it. Even if they don't like it, if it's important and they need to do it in order to get to the next stage, then that itself is enough to give them the motivation to do the task. Personal interaction with the text. So using text and questions that encourage students to engage personally. So if you think back to the volunteers that we had and you working in your pairs with your thumbs up, your thumbs down, you were interacting with the text. If you had just read that without listening or using your own opinions, probably your motivation and your interaction would have been a lot less. And strategies, helping students to identify and develop their reading strategies. So thinking back to the train timetable, the novel, the newspaper article, what strategies do they need to use and how do they need to move their eyes in order to read this text effectively? Okay, so just the final part of the session, we're going to think about activities that we can use in the classroom to solve the problems that we looked at before and encourage all of these characteristics in our learners. So we've already used some activities in this talk that you could use in class with your students. So one of them, which I hope you're still doing, is bingo, okay? So the idea behind bingo not as a game, but as a listening activity, is that you activated your knowledge before we started the talk, and you were already predicting what you thought you might hear, and it gave you a reason to keep listening. Has anyone had bingo yet? 9 words? Not yet? Okay, so it's something that you can do with your students. If you think maybe they're not going to be listening, or maybe you're listening to a very long text or watching a very long film or video clip, just to have that bingo grid there, and that it always encourages them to just keep listening, and they're always motivated to do that. So I want you to just think for a minute about what other activities we've done in the last 30, 40 minutes. So we've done 5 more. Okay, so just think for a minute and talk to your partner. Okay, so just hands up, any activities that you remember doing in the last 30, 40 minutes that you could use with your students? Okay, great. So using the thumbs to interact with the text. Good. Anything else? Some of them are a little bit implicit, so maybe you didn't notice as I was trying out the activity on you. Okay, so let's have a look. So we had noticing eye movements. Okay, so very simple. It wasn't really an activity, but it's something that you can do with your students before actually tackling the text and the meaning, is say, how do you think your eyes should be moving when you read this text? Actually make them aware. Should your eyes be going like this? Should they be going in straight lines? Because sometimes they don't know, and they'll always read in the same way as I said before. So just telling them how to move their eyes is something really basic, but which can help them use the correct strategy for the purpose, therefore saving time when they're doing a reading activity. Responding to the text, okay, so a few of you recognise that. So that's something really good that you can do during a listening text. So if it's a very difficult listening, instead of giving them all the questions to answer at the same time as listening, which is actually a very unnatural thing to do, which we would never do in our native language, is to just say, put your pens down, put your paper away, close your books. You're just going to listen and just show me with your thumbs up, thumbs down, how is the speaker feeling? Are they positive? Are they feeling disappointed, sad? Or maybe if it's a very kind of critical listening that you're doing, do you agree? Do you disagree? And then that way they can share their opinions with each other without actually having to speak. They can just look around the class and actually see how they feel about the text and the meaning of the text rather than the meaning of the words, the meaning that the author is trying to communicate. We also had the keywords only activity, okay, where you were given the keywords and you had to predict what the characteristic was. So this is to make you use your own knowledge to predict and fill in the gaps, which, as we were saying before, learners don't tend to do that. They tend to stop and panic if they don't understand the next word. So try giving them the text with just the keywords. Don't give them the text, just say, here's 5 words from it, what do you think it's about? Or maybe cross out some of the text and say, can you still understand it if I cross out half of the lines, or if I scribble over it, if I spill my pen or spill my coffee on it, can you still understand what it says? And they probably will be able to do it, but you need to explicitly make them do that. The critical comprehension questions. So getting them to engage with the text and form your own opinions. So this is something really important that we tend to overlook because course books have the questions ready prepared, exam tasks have the questions ready prepared, and we have no control over what questions students have in exams. But just getting them to try to engage with the text a little bit more, changing the order of the questions, perhaps, or adding in a final question at the end where they have to actually express their opinion on the text to actually get them to really think about it, about whether they understand what the author is trying to say. And yeah, as I said, questions before the text. Okay, so you can do that we did that in a reading activity. You can do that in a listening activity as well. Show them the questions, they try to answer it, and then you play the listening, and they're more motivated to listen. Okay? You can also have the students write their own questions. So they read the text and they write questions for each other, and you don't use the questions in the book. Okay? Because if it comes from them, they're instantly more motivated. Okay, so on your handouts, you've got lots of activities that you can use with your students. Some of them will be zero preparation, where you just need to, on the day or just before the lesson or just before the activity, you can implement that and it will be something really effective to help them. Others need a little bit more preparation, but obviously you use what you think is relevant for your students. So we're going to just look at one as an example now. So this one is on your handout. So draw a face. So students draw a simple face, a picture, or a short sequence as they read or listen to show what the speaker is feeling. And why would we do this? So that students focus on interpreting the text as a whole and pay attention to clues which will tell them about the speaker's feelings. So this is before you give them any kind of complex question. All you want them to do is just assimilate what they hear and show you that they understand. So I'm going to need one volunteer who's going to be the student. And I'm going to read a very, very short text, and I want somebody to draw a face or draw a symbol to represent how the speaker is feeling. Okay? Are they feeling happy? Are they feeling anxious? Does anybody want to do that? You can all do it as well. I'd like everybody in the audience to do it as well on your worksheet, but I'd just like someone to come up the front and do it so that we can see what you've drawn. Anyone volunteer? Would you like to come? Would you like to come? Come on then. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read a text which is taken from a pre-intermediate course book. Okay, so it's a girl who's writing a blog about her backpacking holiday in Brazil. Okay, so it's a blog. So the language is very, very colloquial, very relaxed. So all of you as well, as you're listening, you can draw. You don't have to show them. You can draw it, and then we can show after. Okay? So just draw. If the tone changes, you can draw another face or another symbol, maybe punctuation, to show how you think this girl is feeling. Okay? So Saturday the 3rd. I can't believe it. I'm in an internet cafe in Rio, 3,000 miles from home, and I've just met Andy, an old school friend from years ago. I didn't know he was here. It's great to see him again, and it's good to have a travel companion. We're going sightseeing in Rio this afternoon, and we're going to travel to Salvador together. It's a long way, but we've decided not to rent a car. We're going to use local transport and go by bus. I might practice my Portuguese with some of the other passengers. Okay, the next day, Monday the 5th. We're staying in a really nice hotel here, but there's bad news. It's 10:15 a.m. and Andy has already started to annoy me. He never stops talking. He didn't stop talking on the bus all the way from Rio to Salvador. That's nearly 24 hours. Oh well, I'm sure it'll get better. I hope it will. More later. Okay. Next entry, Monday the 5th evening. Me again, 3:30 p.m. I can't stand it. Andy hasn't stopped talking yet. I now know everything about his friends, his family, even his neighbour's cat. He's just fallen asleep, but it isn't any better because now he's started snoring. Oh. Okay, so just share with your partners if you drew a face, a symbol, to represent what you heard. Okay, yeah, great, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so maybe, do you want to explain what you've drawn, or?
I guess it's just her gradually getting more and more angry with her friend Andy.
Exactly, okay.
And by the end she can't stand him.
Exactly, okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, so did anyone have anything similar? Did you draw faces? Okay, so that shows me, as a teacher, that you understood the text, and it shows you that you understood it. Because I'm sure if you were reading this in your book, as a learner, you'd probably be quite bored. You don't know this girl, she's not your friend. Why would you be reading her blog in a course book? It's not a natural thing, okay? Usually you read blogs about people who you're friends or people you're interested in, okay? But doing an activity like this actually gets you to interact with the text. You were forced to listen and you were motivated to listen because you wanted to represent what you were feeling and what the speaker was feeling. Okay? And then that actually gives you more confidence to then tackle the exercise itself because you know that you've understood the text. Okay? So as I said, you've got lots of other activities on the handout, so I really hope that you can make use of those in your classes. So just in your own time, just have a read. All of them are connected to those 4 areas that we looked at earlier. Okay? Has anyone got any questions or anything they want to comment on? No? Okay? So thank you very much for listening.